Okay, so the lion's share of the next two parashiot deals with Tzara'at. Admittedly, it starts not with that, right? You get a small unit at the beginning of Tazria with the halachot of Tuma Yoledet, of the purity and impurity laws that accompany childbirth, and then sort of thrown in the middle of there, you get the discussion of bris milah and a parenthetical comment in the middle, from which Chazal derive that the only time that a bris can be done on Shabbos is in such a case in which the birth warranted purity. Impurity laws, hence not a C-section. A baby born on C-section will still have bris on the 8th day, but not if it's on Shabbos. So you get that small unit at the beginning, and then you continue into this detailed discussion of Tzara'at. Now, there is a bit of a question as to why it's ordered this way. Rav Tzvi Hoffman assumes that the reason that these discussion of Tuma and Tara begin with the childbirth laws is because there's the most intense Tuma come at the beginning. In a certain sense, that's true, just in the sense that the prohibition to enter the Mikdash goes for 40 or 80 days. Right? Even after the Tara comes, the actual prohibition of the Mikdash is the longest possible that we have. Alternatively, Rav Samet suggests that the reason it's bracketed off at the beginning is because the rest of the Tumah after this are, at least in Chazal's thought, associated with sin. Childbirth is not. Right? Sort of like off to the side. Whatever the case may be, the majority discussion here is about Tzara'at. Now, Tzara'at is interesting. Right, sort of each day I did a little bit of an experiment with my guys this week on Tzara'at. Tzara'at, I say to my guys, Tzara'at, are you looking while you Torah? Are you looking at any share thing? What do they all talk about? Right? No one wants to talk about Tzara'at because they don't know what to do with Tzara'at. So they all give shir on Lashon Hara, because that's what everybody remembers, that Tzara'at is a punishment for Lashon Hara. The fascinating thing is that there is literally zero indication in the Torah that it's a punishment for Lashon Hara. Maybe a hint that it's for Lashon Hara. There's no hint in these parshiot that it's for any sin whatsoever, much less a specific sin of Lashon Hara. Compound that with the fact that everyone's like, oh yes, but that's what the Chazal say. That's what the Gemara says. It's not true. The Gemara says that it is one of many possible sins. Right? That same Amud. It's not like you have to look somewhere else. That same Amud in the Gemara that says that Lashon Hara causes Tzara'at also says that it's caused by arrogance and murder and theft and false sins. Right? There's a whole laundry list of sins that it goes through, which it only complicates the question. The fundamental question we have to have, which is, well, if it really is for sin, why does the Torah just not talk about it, right, at all? The silence is so absolute as to why one gets Tzara'at. Right? It's like, you would think that if it was a punishment for a specific sin, like it was meant to tell you that you did a specific sin so that you would repent, the Torah would have said that at some point. But it's, right, sometimes the Torah doesn't give you the rationale for a mitzvah, and that's fine. You can bring 100 rationales for every mitzvah if you want. But if it were, you would think that if Tzara'at were a predictive punishment, like you do this sin and you get this punishment, and therefore you know to repent, the Torah should tell you that at some point. Its silence is so absolute that there are relatively mainstream commentaries who just deny this entire conception of Tzara'at linked to sin at all. Like the Ralbag just says, no, it's a natural contagious disease, and all the halachot here are meant to avoid contagion, right? Like you put them outside of this, outside of...
So why deal with the Kohen? Why not with the doctor?
Well, that's what everyone says. Well, that can't be, because why the Kohen, why whatever, right? But my point is not to endorse the Ralbag. My point is that somewhat as standard as the Ralbag is a little bit interesting, but they point out in Al HaTorah on the website, it's not as the Ralbag. Rabbi Yochanan in the Gemara seems to hold this in Ksubos Ayin Zayin, where he says that in Bavel we don't get Tzara'at, because of X and Y hygienic practices that we have in terms of bathing, things like that, and eating, which means that there's a member of Chazal that think you can avoid this by, good hygiene, right? That's not like, right, there's not like some crazy, you'll get it like academics. No, it's just, the ancient Jews, they ritualized what was a natural disease, like a member of Chazal, the Ralbag, right? Again, I'm not endorsing it, I think it points to the fact that the silence is overwhelming in terms of why you get it. That being the case, I would say, even despite that being the case, Chazal and the majority of the Mepharshim really do think it's punishment. My basic theory as to why then is it silent, right, is because my guess, in sort of a Soloveitchik-esque sense, is that, right, the Rav was very into this in many of his writings, that the primary answer to the question of why is there suffering for a halachic Jew is not a theological one, it's a halachic one. Right? The Rav was very into this. This is how he read all of Eov. Right? That fundamentally, human beings will never truly understand why bad things happen, and therefore the halacha always wants you to use bad things that happen as an opportunity to spur you to do good. Right? Whether or not it is in fact a punishment. Right? So, to give an example, right? You have in the Gemara says that if you are suffering, so then you fash away from Manasav. Then you should think, what am I doing wrong? And you should do tshuva. If you can't find anything you did wrong, then it's probably bittul Torah, because, that's the type of thing that you can always say, I couldn't find anything you did wrong, but I probably didn't learn enough, or with enough intensity. If you can't even find that, so then the Gemara says there's a category called Zirirng The Tuma, right? Suffering out of love, whatever that means, the Rishonim and the Gaonim even, right, go crazy in what that even means. But that Gemara sort of indicates that the Gemara there, Ray Carmi once said this in my first semester in YU. What?
Rav Carmi?
Yeah, Shalom Carmi. He's a professor in YU, I was very close to. So in my first semester in YU, I took a course with him called, I think, Meaning of Suffering or Suffering of Evil. One was the original name, one was the actual name. But that was the course. It was like the theology of suffering. And in Jewish and secular philosophy. So he pointed this Gemara and he said, what's fascinating about this Gemara is that the Gemara does suggest that you should try to answer the why question of suffering, but not conclusively. Right? Like you'll hear sometimes people with pronouncements, right? This war happened because of this sin. Or the Gemara doesn't do that. The Gemara says, if suffering happens, you should try to figure out why it happened. Why? Because that gets you to do tshuva. And if you can't figure out what sin it was, so then, you assume it's bittul Torah to get you to learn more Torah. If you can't figure that out, then it's Yisur Shalava. Right? So the Gemara is not making it's not making a firm theological claim that suffering happened because of this. It's just saying, if you suffer, then the proper response is to treat it as if it's a punishment, even though it might not be. Right? I mean, once the Gemara tells you there's such a thing called Yisur Shalava, it's telling you that, you may be suffering and you may not have sinned at all. But you should still act as if you did, because anything that happens in life, good or bad, but especially bad, is a good way of spurring you to improve who you are. Right? So my guess is that even if Chazal are correct, and I tend to think that there's a reason that Chazal and the majority of Mefarshim, the majority of Chazal, all assume that it was sin, but not one specific sin, not Lashon Hara. Right? People talk about Lashon Hara, not Lashon Hara. It's a series of sins. Right? Is because, right, in sort of this Soloveitchik-esque sense, that the Torah is teaching you that fundamentally you're supposed to relate to suffering as a form of punishment, such that it spurs you to do tshuva, or be contrite, or whatever exactly you want to put in there. Now, to be fair, there are Mefarshim that sort of go in this direction. Rav David Tzvi Hoffman goes in this direction a little bit. Right? Rav David Tzvi Hoffman says it's not that Sarat is punishment, it's that it's symbolic of punishment. Right? It's like a system of symbols it's supposed to make you think about punishment. Right? Like, this is sin instantiated, so to speak, right? Like this is what sin would look like, and the Torah is trying to teach you that
bring it home practically.
Correct, right? That just like to cure this disease, right? It's sort of like the physical manifestation of sin is an illness, right? So the Torah says, we have this symbolic disease which is a physical representation of sin, and the way that you cure it is tamei ikra, right? You tell people, you daven, you go through a Torah process. It's supposed to educate people, sin is real, and it makes you impure, right? I mean, it does something real to you, and you have to undo it, right? So once in a while, we have these mitzvot that are meant to bring it home, right? Yeah, to make it real. Or Yehuda Levi, who says, it represents death, right? And death is whatever is sin, is the lack of life, and okay. But there is more to tzara'at than just sort of the broad strokes, because tzara'at is actually really, really hard-hitting in terms of the imagery and the metaphors that it brings to bear. So, now, okay. I don't know which one to do first. Well, okay. So before we get to that, right, what sins from Tanakh do we actually know, right, are potential causes of tzara'at? Right, just from the Psukim of Tanakh, right? Right, there's a reason that one became the most famous, right? Lashon Hara became the most famous because it's the most famous of the stories. Right, that's Miriam. Well, Moshe, it doesn't tell us why he gets it. Right? Chazal read it into it from Miriam. Right? Because Miriam speaks badly about her brother and gets tzara'at. So then Chazal say, Lashon Hara, and then they read it into Moshe. Moshe spoke badly about the Jews. He said that they wouldn't believe him. He gets tzara'at in his hand. And that's why I think it becomes the most famous. It's the most famous of the narratives. Right? And then Chazal extended it to other narratives. The other one that's explicit in Tanakh is arrogance. Or is it arrogance? And that's the Haftarah from this week. Is this week? Or next week? One of them. I think this week. This week. Next week's the Metzora. This one, Uzziah. Right? That Uzziah is an arrogant king. But he's actually a decent king for most of the time. But he also is arrogant. And Malachim it's less explicit. Yom it's very explicit. That he at some point he becomes arrogant. The pasuk says he becomes arrogant, and he decides he wants to co-opt not just the office of the monarch, but the office of the Kohanim. So he storms the Beit HaMikdash with Ktoret and says, I am going to bring Ktoret, whether you like it or not. And the Kohanim say, you can't do that. You are not a Kohen. You are a king, not a bad king, as things go, but you are a king. You're not supposed to be doing this. And as he brings the tzara'at, as he brings the tzara'at, he gets tzara'at on his head, right? Let's find the pasuk quickly. Let's see, Matziyahu. After Amatziyahu, Uzziyahu, there we go. When he grew strong, he grew so arrogant, and he acted corruptly. And he trespassed against God. And he came into the Heichal to bring the Ktoret. And the Azariah the Kohen comes with 80 soldiers or officers. You are not supposed to do this. This is not your job. This is for the Kohanim. Leave. This is not your honor in front of God. And he got angry. It was and at that point, tzara'at, appears on his head, right? The other famous story is Naaman. I think we talked about it a few weeks ago when it was Naaman, right? That Naaman is an arrogant general. Now, we don't know why he gets tzara in the first place, but we do know, long story short, that after Elisha tells him bathe in the Yarden, and he humbles himself before Elisha and goes in, he loses the tzara. So we know that humility is the cure, and to be fair, in the Miriam story, this is not a bad read of the story either. Meaning, it's not clear whether what gave her tzarat was that she spoke badly about Moshe, or, as God said, how dare you speak badly about Moshe? Don't you know you're not as good a Navi as him? Who do you think you were? Right. So there's a mix of arrogance and lashon hara in it. Okay. Now, but what does tzarat actually look like? So, in a nutshell, right? What is the closest image for a tzara in Torah, besides for a Metzora, right? And what does it, according to the Torah itself, what does a Metzora look like?
The hair's off, it's white.
Yeah, so what does he look like?
Like patch.
Good. So what does he look like? In one word.
Pretty bad.
No, not necessarily. It could be a small patch. It doesn't necessarily mean...
Okay, but according to the Torah's own description, what does he look like?
Sick.
Even worse than sick.
Dead.
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 He looks dead. Right, this isn't a guess. My students were all like, is that a midrash? I'm like, no, that's not actually a midrash. That's a pasuk. Right? In the most famous Torah story, when Aaron turns to Miriam and says, Aaron turns to Moshe and says, Moshe, daven for your sister, because she has tzara. What does he say to her? So he says, Vayomer Aaron Moshe, Bi Adoni, al not asher olinu chatan asher nomu v'asher chatanu. Right? Don't account this sin for us because we made a mistake. Al not tihi kamet. Don't let your sister be like a dead person. Asher b'tzeito merechanimo, who came out of her mother's womb, meaning not just any dead person, but stillborn. Right? Amet asher yatsa merechanimo. Right? V'yechol chatzi b'saro, whose flesh was heavy. I mean, the image of a full body tzara. You're right. Halachically, tzara is more than that. But the Torah's description of what a Metzora looks like, at least in its fullest form, is a dead person. Right? That the skin is falling off. Right? Basically, you think about it. Right? It's white. Right? It's someone who's, right? You know, who's dead. Right? And therefore the blood has flowed away. Right? The skin starts to decay. Or that's what it is. Right? Again, tzara can be much less extreme because it can be a small patch. But the sort of paradigmatic Metzora in Torah, right? Again, my guys were like, "That's not." They just didn't believe me. Like, that's not a pasuk, right? That's like not some midrash. I'm like, no, that's not a midrash. That's like actually how Aaron described tzara, as someone being dead. Right? I mean, and to be fair, right? You start with it. Yes, I mean there are many ways, right? Adam ki yebor b'saro seido sapacharo v'heret v'yabor b'saro l'negat tzara v'valar ha'kohen alachad mibanav ha'kohanim. Right, so he has some sort of patch, some sort of color. It could be white. V'rakohen ha'negab or basar b'sara b'negab fach lavan or ha'negab mok me'or b'saro negat tzaradu v'ro ha'kohen b'timeoto. Right, it's a white patch. He sees it. It's tzara. He makes him tamei, makes him impure. Fine. But you get a very interesting thing with the Metzora, because, okay, one thing is clear. He looks, in its fullest form, like a dead person. The second thing that Chazal picked up on for halachic purposes is that the process of Tahara also reminds us of death. Not death, but Avelut. Right? Mourning. Right? And Chazal, in the third paragraph by Katan, derive three halachot from each other. Death, the status, the laws of Avelut, the laws of a Metzora, and the laws of a Menudeh. Right? Someone who has Tarat, someone who's dead, someone who's mourning, someone who's dead, and someone who is excommunicated. Right? In what sense? So, you get, right? After you go through this whole thing, if he is impure, so then, this is more in next week's parsha after we get through all of it, but what does he do? Right? So this is more in Metzora. He goes michutz l'machaneh. Right? He sits away from people, and he's cut off from right? Social interactions. He can't be intimate with his wife, right? Like an avelud. He calls tamei ikra, right? He has impurity that is of the level of a dead person, right? This is, right, you'll see that the halachot sort of bounce back and forth, whether it's death or avelud, right? In terms of his physical look, he's dead. In terms of his tum'ah, he's dead, right? He has a first level tum'ah, right? It is, right, in halacha we have many different levels of tumot, but a Metzora is avi avud, right? It's like a maze, right? It's avi avud tuma, right? Everything he touches, everything is carried, and everything, right? He's tamei. He is a source of tuma. He has to call out tamei yikra, just like someone who is dead. And then, like I said, you get these avelut laws. That he is now sort of right. So he has to live away from society, which is extreme. The cleansing process, like the only other case in Torah, has a 7-day waiting period with a kohen purifying him. Right, meaning the other tumot that we have don't require this. Right, either they're 1-day tumot, and even 7-day tumot like nida. Right, it just, you go to a mikvah and it's done, or most of the tumot don't have this 7-day process that ends with sprinkling, right? Except for death and sarat, right? Death has a paraduma, and sarat has a different one, but you have a lot of the same elements. Right, you have in Eitz Eretz Ve'ezov, right, you have that what is sprinkled on them. Again, it's not the ashes of this paraduma, but it is with a hyssop, right? I mean, there's, right, this imagery is hard to miss, right? The Tara process of the Metzora as well is very much death-like. Which has led, sort of, if you take these now, right, and it's not only that, right? I mean, sarat of a house, right, is like that also, right? Sarat of a house has that level of tumah of a dead person in a house, right? Ohel, right? It's the only other time we have ohel, right? That the whole house becomes tamei. Anything that enters the house becomes tamei. Everything that's in the house becomes tamei, right? That's what we have.
Take everything out before we declare.
Correct, right? Take everything out, but that's what we have by mace, right? We don't have it by anything else, right? By nida, by zava, by yoledet, right? Take your pick of the other tumah we have. There is no such thing as a house tumah, right? And to be fair, right? Yeah, I mean, it's just like all the halachot around sarat either imitate death or avelud. Which has led people, many sort of, especially modern commentaries, to suggest that this is not an accident. Surprise, right? It's not an accident. That's the point. And now, so let's take this at 2 levels, right? Why would it be, right? Well, let's try to answer both questions, maybe sort of simultaneously, right? Why would it be that an avel, that a Metzora rather, is like he's dead, or his punishment, assuming we're in the world of Chazal, is to be like he's dead, and that he has to be mitabel, right? That he has to sit shiva, and then sort of the key to the end of it will be, and who is he sitting shiva for? Well, the answer there's only one answer to that question. But why would this be the case? So, if we want to sort of, let's work backwards here from Chazal, right? What is the common denominator between the sins that the Torah talks about, ascribes to Metzora? Or even let's just start with the most famous of them, right? Lashon Hara, right? What is key about Lashon Hara? Right? What is so bad about it, right?
I mean, it really does kill a person.
Yeah, right? I mean, that's the way the Gemara says it, right? And I assume the Gemara is based on this, right? That it's called, right? It's Lishna Tilisa. They call it the triple, right? The triple language. It kills the speaker, it kills the listener, and it kills the victim.
I want to point out that I was reading a biography of Mark Madoff, the son of Bernie, and basically, he. With all the, people were accusing him of the crimes, even though from the second that Bernard confessed, he and his brother went to a lawyer immediately, and the lawyer immediately, they didn't even hesitate. And they had a different business, and they were, not indicted, but at some point he did go out and he checked into a hotel room and took pills, but then he came home. But then, and then he was sort of doing okay, and then he got wind that this huge story was coming out that was all these falsehoods, and he hung himself.
Yeah, it's definitely true. It can do that. At the extreme, it really can, right? I've been writing this year about halacha in the age of social media, so one of the articles I've drawn on several times in terms of just reality issues, right? Like sort of how Lashon Hara has changed in the modern age is an article by Helen Andrews that was written in First Things a few months ago. First Things?
First Things.
It's Catholic, yeah. It's like a Catholic, like a popularized like highbrow popularized Catholic literature. Though Ray Carmi has a monthly post in it also. So, but yeah. So he wrote a recent. So Helen Andrews wrote a recent piece called Shame Storm about her 20-year journey to escape a YouTube clip from her ex-boyfriend who had, after a bad breakup, had lambasted her character on a panel, and then went viral, and then she said she ended up moving to Australia when she got remarried, and married, and she couldn't escape there, started changing her name, just dogged her for decades, right? There was nothing.
I didn't care for her.
And it was.
But certainly there's Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, there was so someone else. After I wrote this, someone posted me that John Oliver had done a piece just 2 weeks ago, I think, on this on media shaming and did an interview with Monica Lewinsky. How did you survive it? Right? There's a lot. So obviously, at some level,
she, in a way, her life really did stop. She hasn't.
Right, and
she hasn't been able to get married and have kids and just live existing.
Yeah, so he had an interview on her, which so part of it, right? Obviously, I think at some level is that Lashon Hara can really, it can kill a person. Now it's not only Lashon Hara though, right? If we wanted to, in less extreme cases, right? That's absolutely the extreme, but Lashon Hara is the paradigmatic. Well, I'll say this, it's sort of paradoxical. It's the paradigmatic social and antisocial sin. Right? Meaning it is the social sin, obviously. In the ultimate sense, it is the social sin, right? Nicholas DeFonza writes about this excellently. Nicholas DeFonza, I don't know how people get into this profession. I just don't understand. Nicholas DeFonza is a professor at the University of Rochester, I think, who is considered, according to his biography, the foremost expert in the world on rumors. Okay, he studies rumors for a living. Fine. So he wrote a book called The Water Cooler Effect, which is actually an excellent book. It's sort of funny to devote your life to rumors, but it's an excellent book, where he argues that rumors are so contagious because they feed into two of human beings' most natural desires. One is to connect with other people, right, to socialize, and the second is to make sense of the world. Right? And this is how we make sense of the world, through other people. It happens to be that there are victims to this, right? But we build bonds by bad-mouthing other people, and it makes sense of the world because, rumors, they make sense of people, they make sense of everything, Right? That's why we tell rumors, they make sense of something, right? So it is social, but it's not pro-social, right? It's antisocial, right? Meaning it is at the cost of victims, right? It creates strife within society, right? It creates factions. Obviously we connect with the people we speak Lashon Hara to, but fine. But arrogance also, right? Arrogance, the Uzziah story should be evidence of this, is a very antisocial behavior, right? Especially that level of arrogance, right? All these people, the Kohanim, right? They're not telling him, they're saying, you have your role, we have your, right? Our role, can we just get along? And no, right? The arrogance led him, I am better than everybody, I need everything, right? Extreme hubris is an antisocial behavior. If you wanted to, this is true, it's just an understatement, right? Murder is antisocial, sure, right? I was sort of the extreme sense. Theft is another example that the Gemara picks as one of the avera that is caused by that causes tzaraat. So let's hold that thought for a moment. Second point is that death, right, is, again, sort of the understatement, but death is the most antisocial thing that can happen to you, right? You know, right, when I said this to my students, I was like, it's an understatement. It's sort of funny when you think about it. Like, yes, Jack hasn't been so talkative recently. I mean, yes, right, if someone's dead, that is true. Right, it is the end of your social life, right? And especially if you believe in the afterlife, it's not the end of your existence, right? It's the end of your life within society. That's what it is. Okay. Now, Avelut. Let's move to Avelut for a moment. Right? Avelut, why is it that people mourn? So you would say, well, someone's dead. I mean, that's true. But if you think about it, and this is the way Ray Foreman puts it, I like this formulation, Avelut, you don't mourn for them. Right? Because look, you believe in Olam Haba, they're in Olam Haba. Even without talking about Olam Haba, right? If you, right, if you believe in Olam Haba, the soul's in a better place. Right? If you're an atheist, right, and you don't believe in the world to come, then the person's dead and no longer knows that, right, can't be sad about their own death, they're dead. Right? Mourners don't mourn, right? They don't mourn on behalf of the dead person. They mourn because they can no longer interact with the dead person, right? I mean, mourning is an expression of a lack of potential connection, right? Right? The people who are closest to someone mourn their death because they no longer have access to them, right? Again, the dead person, if you believe in Olam Haba, which I do, right, is in a better place, whatever, right? But again, this is one of those things where religious people and atheists agree, right? Dead people are not mourning for themselves, right? They're gone. Either they don't know what's going on or they do know what's going on, but the point is, whatever, they've moved on. But mourners mourn for themselves, right? For what they have lost in the fact that they're no longer connected to the person who's passed away. Now you bring it together, right? And what, again, many sort of modern commentaries have constructed from this is, okay, let's figure out what Chazal are thinking. Tzaraat, according to Chazal, is a punishment for a series of sins that destroy relationships within society. So what is the proper punishment for such a series of sins? Is to make the person endure a living death. Right? If you are dead, you don't feel the lack of connection because you're dead. But if you have led to the lack of connections, right? You've said Lashon Hara and you've created fights and strife in society, right? And we want you to feel what it means to lose connection, so we put you in a living death, right? Where we give you the Tuma of death, we cut you off from society like you're a dead person. Right? Every time someone tries to come close to you, you have to say Tamei Tamei Ikra, right? We make you shun society as if you were off limits like a dead person, but you're actually alive. Right? And so who are you mourning for? You're mourning for yourself. Right? Or, right, Foreman's formulation, this I'm not as convinced of. Right? He says you're mourning for the social aspect of yourself. I think it's just more simple, right? Much simpler, I think. Grossman puts it, right? This is the title of his article on the topic, which is The One Who Mourns for Himself. Right? Is that the way Chazal... Yoni Grossman. If I remember, right? I mean, I was just looking today, because I was just looking like, these are things I've given share on before, so I was like, okay, what articles? And I just saw the title, I'm like, oh yes, right, Yoni Grossman, the mourner, right, one who mourns for himself. But it's simple, right? That's what it is. It's that we're making you experience death, right? Being cut off from society, being shunned, right? Being such that contact with you, right, leaves people impure. But you're also the Avel, right? You're not just the dead person, you're the mourner. Because you are forced to be cognizant of what brought you to this state.
So the people that want to talk to him also mourn?
Well, they can, right? He's supposed to scream when they come near him, Tamei Tamei Kra. Right? They have to, stand away from him. They could theoretically right? Talk to him, but the halachot are meant to cut off social connection.
So
right?
is that the same reason that you mourn for a dead person?
Well, that's exactly the point, right? That's right, Foreman's point, right? Is that now they're mourning, right? So the other people don't mourn, right? Meaning, right? They don't mourn because it's more like, from their perspective, it's more like, their husband or father went on a business trip, right? Whatever, right? Like, he's gone for a period of time, but he'll be back, right? But he experiences his, like, from their vantage point, so sure, their father is away for a week or two, but they still have their siblings, they still have their friends, right? Whatever, like, people go away, right? I travel for work, I'm away, right? No one mourns my, help, or no one mourns my, like, right? And to be fair, right, I have people on the other side, right? I'm not with my family, but I have friends there. I have, I'm at my parents for a little bit, my in-laws for a little bit, right? But he, right, they're not going to mourn because he's coming back eventually when he, manages to do tshuva and go through the Torah process. He'll be back, but he's basically in solitary, right? He's in solitary for a few weeks, right? And like all the studies, right? Solitary, I forget how many days it is until you go mad, right? But it's not that many, right? Like the mental, right? The lasting psychological damage of solitary begins after like not so many days, right? Which has been repeated more recently in political conversation as to the inhumanity of solitary confinement, right? But that's what he's basically in. He's basically in solitary. Right? So, yeah, his relatives aren't mourning for him. He's mourning his own death. Right? And the theology behind it is, if Chazal are correct, that Sarat is a punishment for a series of antisocial behaviors, right, in the extreme, then the best way of not just punishing, but rehabilitating is saying, look what you've done. Right? You've said Lashon Hara, and you've forced X person to be ostracized from his friends and family. Right, because of what you said about him. How do you like it? Right? Here. Right? Everyone will think negatively of you and will lock you out of society for a little bit. How are you going to feel about that? Right? And Chazal pick up on things like this. Right? Chazal talk about the fact that, why does he say Tamei Tamei Kra? Because he needs people to daven for him. Right? Meaning, he's supposed to not just say, I'm Tamei, but he's supposed to announce to the world, I need you. Right? I need you to daven. That's part of my process. That's part of what's going to make me pure. Right? Chazal are picking up on this notion that if he, felt he didn't need them, right? Let's take the arrogance one for an example. Part of the process of tahara is he needs to feel like he needs people again, right?
And our opponent bring people together.
Oh, you know what? I just realized that I think that's where Chazal got it from. Right? Why? I think you're right. Why did Chazal think he needs to say Tamei Tamei Yikra as Tefillah? Right? Because of Aharon. Right? Because the one Metzora we know has someone else request Tefillah on her behalf. Right? Aaron intercedes to Moshe and says, daven for her. Right? That's actually interesting. Right? And yes, it happens to be that the personality is Aaron. Right? Which would fit very well. Right? That it's both the notion that you need Tefillah, right? And that you need sort of other people to be involved with it, and that yes, it happens to be Aaron who brings about this reconciliation between Moshe and Miriam, which is not surprising in that sense. And so again, when you put it all together, right, Sarat is this fascinating combination of, on the one hand, the Metzora is al nati hikanate, is actually dead, but they're in a living death. And therefore they have to mourn themselves, right? And why do they have to do that? Because mourning is the way that we express our lack of connection to people, right? To the person who's passed away. But in this case, in a living death, the mourner, i.e. the Metzora, is forced to recognize his or her contribution to the breakdown of social bonds and feel that by mourning himself. Right, and I'll just say the last thing, right, is that it makes sense that the third category that halachically is equivalent to Metzora is Metzora, Avel, and as I mentioned at the beginning, the Nuda, someone who's excommunicated. Right, meaning it's not an accident. Right, the third person in that category is the same thing. It's someone who's literally, right, the only thing we know about him is that he's excommunicated, and therefore how he dresses and how he, right, is a function of this. Again, pointing out the fact that at its core, right, that's really the problem of tzarat, as Chazal understood it, is it's a punishment for antisocial behaviors, and the rectification of it is to put you in a situation where you feel like dead, such that you realize what you've caused in society and attempt to mend that. And when you do, right, and you need the Kohen, right, and yes, that may be why you need Kohanim. Definitely one of the Midrashim suggests that. The reason that you need Kohanim specifically to be involved is Kohanim represent Aaron, and Aaron was the Osei Shalom, right? And the way that we do that, or is the only people that can interact with are Kohanim, right, who are symbolic of this ability to make peace, right? And that's who they have to learn from if they ever want to get out of this living death. Okay, I got to go get your in the end.